So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so pleased that we managed to pull this off. When I said to my team we're going to have a panel in the middle of a wood, they looked at me very strangely and said, "What?" But it seems to be such a nice day. It's worked out well. Welcome you to Home Farm and to this event. Excited to talk to you all about sustainability, regenerative beauty, and zero carbon. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with all of the amazing brands and speakers and thinkers that have agreed to come. So thank you everyone for coming. I hope we have a great discussion, and I hope that after we have the discussion, we can all have a lovely lunch and enjoy a beautiful afternoon of wellness. So enjoy. And over to Jessie.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. What an amazing setting to have a discussion on regenerative beauty. It feels very regenerative here, doesn't it? I'm really excited to be here today. I'm Jessie, founder and CEO of Provenance, and going to try and not screw up chairing this panel of absolute rock stars. So we have Ben Grace from Sbtrct, Anna Brightman from Upcircle, Sophie Robinson from the Soil Association Certification, our esteemed host, of course, Laura Rudoe from Good Ventures and Evolve, and last but not least, the author and strategist, John Grant. So, John, I think you're going to help tee up the topic. What is regenerative beauty?
Hello, I'm about to have the first bunting accident in summer in competing with the lawnmower, so summer is here. Laura invited me because we were working on new brand adaptology and looking also at evolved sustainability, and I had a chart that said regenerative beauty. And it's a conversation I'd been in for quite a long time. And she said, "Oh, what's that? That sounds interesting." And then she said, "I'm not sure we're there yet." Regenerative is a word that started in agriculture in the 1980s. And it's a philosophy about letting the soil grow stuff the way it wants to grow it and not having inputs to control the soil. So things like no-till farming, which means not ploughing, and cover crops and other stuff. And soil is now a really, really hot topic in the UN, climate and so forth, because soil retains 3 times as much carbon as air. And if it's healthy, one study says it could, like in the words of what's known, Craig Sams, he said we could take carbon levels in the atmosphere back to the 1950s level if we just had the world's farming soil was healthy. So it's a really hot topic, and regenerative agriculture is now a big part of the strategy of companies like Unilever and PepsiCo, who have huge carbon targets and biodiversity targets and so forth. And it's a way of working where they're growing the crops in order to have a positive impact from that farm rather than a negative impact. So that's where the word comes from. By the time I was showing it to Laura, I showed her a slide saying Walmart is now a regenerative company. And it had become, and that's the debate, but they are trying on a number of fronts, and they're, they have a very big impact. So their changes are very welcome. By then it had become part of the net positive debate, where you're not just aiming. There was somebody from a fashion brand called Christy Dawn said sustainability isn't good enough. What are we trying to sustain? Is it the forest fires, the biodiversity loss, the runaway climate change? We've got to be more ambitious. So the spirit of being, in my last book, I talked about sustainability being about not bad, but also net good. And for skincare, regenerative is really interesting because the skin is very similar to the soil. It has a biome, and actually there is a new field emerging, a new debate emerging in skincare about supportive skincare, which is supporting the skin's healthy process. The skin already self-cares, it self-exfoliates, it self-hydrates and so forth, and actually supporting those processes with a very few inputs and a bit more training about diet and moisture and other stuff is a much more healthy, rounded thing that would also lead to people having maybe 3 items in their bathroom cabinets rather than 30, because actually it would be a very simple back to basic approach. So I think it's a really rich topic, and I think it has touched on many things, ranging from the Soil Association. There is now a regenerative organic standard for this type of, but through to upcycling and other things which are trying to make a positive impact.
Definitely.
That felt like 5 minutes, so I'll stop.
Wonderful. No, thank you, John. That's a really helpful framing, I think. And it's exciting. Like, I feel like sustainability has been such a buzzword for so long, but you're right, that's just the break-even point, and we have to go beyond it. So I'm really excited to dig in and find out what we can do. How can we go beyond it? Let's get practical. So to start off, let's hear a little bit from each of you. What does regenerative beauty mean to you? Let's start with you, Ben.
Hello, everybody. So I thought I'd just mention, a bit more about Sbtrct very quickly, just because obviously we're the youngest brand here, so you might not be familiar with it. So we're a zero waste brand, skincare brand. So what that means is our products are solid in state, negate the need for plastic, waste-based formulations and palm oil. And I think for me, John mentioned the word of philosophy, and for me, regenerative beauty, originally focused on biodynamic farming and enabling the environment to thrive. And I think enabling the environment to thrive is a very kind of key part of this whole thing. But, obviously our environmental impact as an industry goes beyond how we source our ingredients. So it also impacts, of course, our supply chains, our manufacturing practices, our packaging, all those different things. And so it's about applying that philosophy of enabling our environment to thrive across all those different elements of our businesses. And that's a very lofty goal for anybody, I think. And so what's encouraging is, there's so much collaboration within the industry. And what's exciting about days like today is, some of the most innovative brands, in the space doing so much good work and collaborating and recognizing that we need to work together to kind of achieve those targets.
Absolutely love that. And I totally agree. I think, farming's been touched on a few times, but we have to think about that holistic view and collaboration. But I think a fellow brand that will be on the zero waste path as well. Anna, tell us a bit about what Regen means for you guys at Upcircle.
Yeah, so if anyone's not aware, at Upcircle, we, as the name implies, are focused on the circular economy, and we do that through a regenerative approach to the ingredient sourcing. So every single product that we make is made with a core byproduct ingredient that we have intercepted from a different industry, stopped it from being wasted by turning it into a high-performance skincare ingredient instead. We take the same approach with packaging, offering a full packaging return scheme across the UK, and hopefully in the future an ambition more broadly as well. I think there's lots of people on this panel who will talk about farming, but one thing that's quite interesting, I think, specific to what we do with regards to being regenerative, is the fact that when we're choosing to grow an ingredient and working with the farmers that are doing that, what we try to maximize is the yield of the plants that we're choosing to grow and making use of every single part of that. And lots of the ingredients that we work with are kind of husks or shells or stones, pits, seeds, things that were previously being does, which is part of being growers themselves and enabling them to continue to grow into the future, is adding a brand new revenue stream for those growers. So I can give an example of the argan shell powder that we use in our face moisturizer. It's grown by women's cooperatives in Morocco. They didn't have any use for that, but we're now offering to buy it for them. So that's a slightly different angle, but something specific to what we do, which I think also plays a part in the future of being regenerative with regards to the growing of ingredients.
Definitely. And then Sophie, so soil feels like one of the top keywords associated with regenerative. Tell us a bit about, frame it from a Soil Association certification perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So Soil Association, the charity, was founded in 1946 and was primarily concerned with preserving the soil and farming in such a way that doesn't damage it. And I think that regenerative farming is really key in making sure that we don't do that, obviously. It's about working with soil and making sure that it's kept healthy by not putting in negative inputs as part of agriculture. But then it goes further than that, I think. I think it's also making sure that your formulations are fully biodegradable, that they're non-toxic when they go into the environment, because chemical runoff can be so damaging to soil and other ecosystems as well. But I also think it goes even further. It's actually about societal change as well, and making sure you're supporting farmers to be able to grow and sustain themselves too. And all of these factors have a framework which can be founded or inorganic and then grow from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because I feel like with packaging, people are often thinking about plastics and things like that. So rarely people are thinking about the plastics that are going down the sink, which huge prevention of sustainability and regen. Laura, let's hear about you, especially the work you've been doing with John. Like, love to hear about how Regen's working at Evolve.
So I think we have a very broad approach to regenerative beauty and sustainability. So we're doing a lot of the things we talked about. We use upcycled ingredients. We are certified organic. We've also looked at things like having plastic negative certification. So we try and help to put back into the environment in that way as well. So where we buy plastic, we fund projects that take plastic out of the environment. And we think about what John was talking about in terms of wellness too. So when you think about this, you can think about the environment and then also people and their health. And I think that just the idea of natural ingredients and how they interface both with our bodies and with the environment is probably at the core of what we do in this area, because we know that natural ingredients are more likely to be better for your body and also for the natural environment. That's really our focus, and we use our certification with Cosmos to really help to do that, because what we're doing with that is making sure that all of our products meet that standard, and that then we then have we feel comfortable then that across a number of different objectives, the biodiversity, making sure that they're biodegradable and all of those things across the board, we're trying to be sustainable, and we're working towards being regenerative, but we're not there yet. As we've talked about with John, how can we be putting more back in? And that's sort of what we're working towards, and that's in a way why I wanted to have these discussions, because it's really interesting. What are the ways we could become positive in the future? Because we're working towards that, but how can it be done?
Well, it's a perfect segue into my next question. I mean, this all sounds fantastic, but I think the reality is we all know it's hard to build a sustainable brand. Like even getting to break even is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
And I think we're all amongst friends here. So I think let's be honest, let's be open, let's collaborate and talk about how hard it is, like what the challenges are. And if you guys have got any hacks and tricks for brands at home or here to get started. So Anna, let's start with you. You know, you've been bringing in, fantastic waste products into your supply chain for a while now, really ahead of the game. I think have inspired a lot of people. How are you kind of measuring your kind of, your sort of net waste output? And I'd love to hear a bit about kind of some of the challenges with working in that quite new way.
Yeah, there have been many challenges along the road. We've obviously grown relatively quickly, but that in itself has been really difficult. You have to have manufacturers who fully back what you're doing and believe in your broader vision in order for them to be willing to start again over and over and over again. And of course, the products that we make go through the exact same tests as everyone else. But there are certain things like certification, which are much more difficult for us. Measuring our impact, much more difficult for us, because we have to trace those ingredients back to like an entire new life that they had before they even got to where we were dealing with them. So we measure our impact often through things like how the weight of the ingredients that we've salvaged. And that's relatively easy to do. 450 tons of coffee grounds, which is the first ingredient that we started working with, that we have tangibly collected from coffee shops and cafes all over London and turned our signature range, which is a range of exfoliators. We can do that with every ingredient that we work with. So, fruit powders, the things that I spoke about earlier. Carbon, much more difficult. We're on the path to that at the moment. But again, it's just through making sure that we are choosing suppliers that are in alignment with us. And we do look for, we're a London-based brand, so our manufacturing doesn't happen in-house. So we make sure that with any manufacturer that we work with, they have Soil Association certification. And it might not be the case that we can put that stamp on our own products because of our commitment to circularity and the complications that then ensue with the traceability of that. I mean, the coffee scrubs are a perfect example. Well over 50% of that formulation is made up of coffee, and we're sourcing it from hundreds of different coffee shops. Now, we have chosen those coffee shops based on whether they're fair trade, the quality of the coffee, is it organic, is it Arabica, etc. But in order to get certification, they would all also have to get certification, which is never going to happen. So there's, a whole massive web of intricate challenges that go on behind the scenes. There's also a massive conversation around kind of consumer perception of what we're dealing with, and that's difficult. We have to be very careful with the words that we choose to use. I try not to use waste, for example, because ultimately we're in the beauty industry here and we're asking people to put these things on as eye creams and face serums. So there's a lot of work that we have to do to talk about the fact that the ingredients that we're working with are of no lesser quality. They're not old, they're not unclean. Often through the original process that they have, they increase in their benefits. That's another whole side of things. But back to your question on how we trace, we love to measure our impact on things like the amount of ingredients that we've saved, or the amount of bits of packaging that we've refilled. And today is World Refill Day, and we tallied that up yesterday, and we launched it last year. 1 person in my team manages it, and we've refilled 12,000 pieces of packaging. She, I should say, has refilled 12,000 in 1 year, which I think is really great.
Wow.
So that's
Amazing.
another little bit of measurement.
Love that. Okay, so we've touched on one of the challenges with organic, I guess, like sourcing upcycled ingredients and feeding that into the organic certification process. Sophie, any other challenges you're seeing brands getting certified, or challenges in setting the standards yourselves when it comes to regenerative?
Yeah, well, as Anna has very aptly highlighted, trying to trace where your products come from and the impact that they have had throughout the course of, from being a raw material to actually becoming an ingredient is super difficult. How is it being processed? What were the inputs that were involved in creating this? And that is something that I know a lot of our brands really struggle with, because it's a really, really hard piece to do. And I think, obviously, I'm very, very pro certification because I think it provides transparency and structure. But I do, of course, see that there are some places where actually you might not be able to do that, and actually you're doing something really valuable outside of that space. So I think that is a key challenge for us, making sure that, certification is as rigorous as it needs to be, but also being able to support people in finding other ways to be regenerative that are still positive. And I think as well, another real challenge with the idea of regenerative beauty is what does it mean? Regenerative isn't a protected term. It's a bit like clean in the beauty industry. It'll mean something different to me, to all of you here. So where you've got brands that are working really hard to make sure that they are being clear and honest and open with their consumers, they're using the right words, they're not misleading anybody. There's so much time and effort that's going into that, where some people can be quite unscrupulous and then begin to use terms with minimal inputs. So I think that's a real challenge.
And is that something the Soil Association is looking to address? Are you looking to, because I think we spoke before a little bit that organic is maybe the floor for regenerative, and actually we need to set standards that are higher. Are you guys looking at developing further certifications, or how might we help consumers understand if a product's regenerative?
So it's super tricky. I think organic, as you said, is a floor or a framework for regenerative to be built around. By its very nature, it tends to encourage regenerative practices. And I think that something we can practically do, and something that we do with Cosmos, which is the certification standard which we actually certify to, is consistently review the standard, ensure that it's moving forward, it's being progressive, but also that we're coming out against greenwashing, and making it clear that you can't just make claims without a base. And I think actually the public are becoming really engaged with that now as well, which is hugely positive.
Yeah, totally agree. But I think regenerative is such a loaded term, and I think the reality is we know it's incredibly difficult to actually reach that. So I think it seems to me like it should be more of an internal term for brands to work towards as a goal, rather than something we put out there, it could confuse shoppers quite significantly. Laura, let's dig in. And you mentioned initially ingredients and natural ingredients. I'd love to hear a bit more about challenges of practically, how do you actually make a regenerative beauty product, or strive towards that?
So I think one of the things that I think is our advantage is that we make the products in our own studio. And I think what that gives us is the control over where actually buying the ingredients, because a lot of times brands are buying via a third party, and it's hard enough for us. We have 190 plus ingredients, and we were trying to get information about them for our carbon mapping, and just even trying to understand where everything was from was challenging. But we were able to do it because at least we had the ingredients list and we knew the contacts, and we could try and go and do it. As a small brand, you can't always get much information. I feel that it's surprising how that is still quite a black box, and I think that's a big area which we would like to work on around, well, where do these ingredients come from? How are they farmed? Are they all farmed in a ethical way? And I think the standards can really help with that, but the Cosmos standard isn't entirely designed to do that. It's more about what's actually in the products rather than how they were grown, and I think that is where we could extend it further, and where we would really like to do more work. But it's really hard as a small brand to do that, and that's even with the fact that we have our own manufacturing.
Sorry again.
So I think that's the area of challenge, but I think we do have an advantage in the fact we make the products in our own studio, which does give us a lot of control over the process. And that is the area where we're looking next. at trying to take things further.
Okay, interesting. So bringing things in-house, vertical integration.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go. I mean, Ben, such an impressive background. I'm so excited for what you're building with Sbtrct.
Thank
I mean,
you.
it feels like you're at the beginning of what's going to be a real rocket ship of a brand.
Thank
But
you.
how overwhelming? I'm sure there's other small brands that are kind of tuning into this.
Yeah.
How do you even get started? Starting a business is hard enough, let alone trying to make it regenerative.
Yeah.
How do you get started?
Well, I think the first thing is to recognize that there isn't, a silver bullet for this. And so, if you're waiting for that silver bullet to land on your plate, it's not going to happen. So the important thing is that you get going, and that for me, it was taking a step back, looking at the environmental challenges as I saw them facing the industry, and then picking ones that I knew that I could have an impact on immediately and in a short space of time. So that was, as I said, sort of plastic pollution, and then also, water, so not having any water in our products, but also palm oil as well. So they were the three challenges that I chose to tackle in the first instance. Yeah. And I think Anna said, you finding people who believe in what you're doing is the absolute key to it. So, we use external manufacturers as well. So finding people who really believe in your vision and what you're trying to do is so important. And that goes for investors and, the whole cast of hundreds of people who are, behind putting a brand out there into market. So I think finding the right people is incredibly important. Collaborating with other brands is incredibly important. And I think one thing, again, a day like today, 10, 15 years ago would never have happened, where there's like 3 brands sat on a platform talking, sharing ideas around this. So that's incredibly encouraging. And so for me, it's kind of like picking the challenges, that you feel that you can have the control over. You're a small business, you've got limited resource. To try and take everything on is just impossible. Recognizing that you're on a journey, and both Evolve and Upcircle, have developed, their sustainability credentials over time. And I think that's just something that everybody has to accept, is something that you do, and just make sure that what you're doing is transparent. And so, for example, zero plastic, that's very clear what that means. We don't use plastic. So it's about just clarity as well as messaging, I think. And I guess with regeneration, that's why I think it's important that we should think about it like it's a philosophy rather than a badge that we can all say I'm regenerative, because no one's there yet, and no one's there across the board either. So thinking about it as a philosophy, I think is really important.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that makes loads of sense. I think that really helps frame it. And I love this camaraderie between brands. I agree. It's so nice that, it's so true though. I love the kind of culture that's emerging with brands that are focusing on sustainability, that are, they're jostling but maybe just trying to compete on impact rather than, sales or whatever, which I think is such a refreshing state of business. John, any comments on challenges that you've seen?
Well, I was actually going to bring Provenance into it. I would, but Jess, who I think from Natural State Brownies, and she talked to you about this when I was talking to her, that I'm the reason she's called Natural State and not 100% natural. But she was like, she's really, really passionate about regenerative farming and sourcing cacao for their lovely brownies. And then she sails them over, or that was the plan. Yeah. She's very focused on all impacts. But we were like, and she's also quite young and innovative and techy, and she was going, there must be a way of actually, if the farming's regenerative, you should be able to have testing kits for the soil, and actually certification schemes on the ground in places she works, like Belize. The literacy rates mean that you end up with the big co-ops rather than the smallholders, and actually having a way of doing it, maybe with today's smartphones and obviously blockchain and other stuff. But I think technology can help somewhere in this, because working out this spaghetti mess of where everything comes from and what's included in your LCA is intractably difficult, but we do live in this sort of big data information age. So I wondered if you had thoughts on it.
Absolutely. No, I think technology has got a key role to play. I mean, the reality is it's vital to building a business now, it's vital to sourcing, but also I think the regenerative journey is a messy one. And I think it's been touched on a few times, kind of how you communicate this with consumers. And I think we are starting to see this new era of kind of glass box brands, basically people being very open and transparent, and those true stories being kind of the key to a brand story. And I think we have to encourage that more and more, because the reality is it's not a finite state. Like we have to keep that transparency going, show how we're failing, show how we're succeeding. And I personally think that is how you build brand trust in the future. But actually, it's a really good segue, because I want to do some dreaming. Let's all dream as a panel together. together, you know, imagine a future, the perfect beauty and personal care brand of the future that's regenerative and is doing everything right. Just love to hear a few keywords, a few aspects that those brands might have, so we can kind of inspire entrepreneurs on the line and others to think about that wonderful future. Let's start with your brand. We're going to go.
I'm going to use the word evolve, I think, just because you know, you're authority when you're collaborating. I mean, I don't want to sort of repeat myself too much, but just the level of support that I've had from brands starting to try been absolutely incredible. I think that will be key, and I think we'll see much more of that over time.
Love that. Evolve's been thrown to you. What's your kind of
concentrates? It's something we're working on easily. It's in the works. You know, people like Skipping Rock Labs are using all this amazing algae technology, and I'm sure in the future there'll be more interesting and easy to use packaging materials. And I would love there to be more visibility on the supply chain. Maybe as part of a standard like Cosmos, we could do all of our certification in one go. So we would be able to check whether the ingredients are not just natural and organically grown, but also how they, you know, ethically grown, and we would know more about where they came from. So you could be able to have much more visibility as a small brand without having to do the legwork on trying to find all of that, which is so impossible.
Makes sense. Yeah, transparency and small is beautiful. Totally agree. Sophie.
Yeah, I mean, my keyword is 100% transparency, because I think it's so important in order for brands to be able to grow, in order for farming to be able to progress, and in order for consumers to clearly understand what it is that they're purchasing and the inputs that have gone into that.
Definitely.
So I think transparency, and also considering the fact that skincare is a luxury and it should be one that's conscious.
Yes, totally agree. Anna, future.
What do I build onto that? I was going to speak about the packaging, the weight of packaging specifically. So we choose materials that are most readily recycled all over the world, because we don't know where our customers are going to end up. We are currently sold in 40 different countries, and the efficiency of recycling schemes in different countries is completely different. But materials like glass or aluminium are pretty readily recycled everywhere, so we choose them. However, there is no perfect brand or choice. Glass is heavy, it takes water to produce, etc. So packaging innovation, as has already been mentioned, is definitely the thing that is most difficult for us. And again, as has already been mentioned, we try to caveat the impact that we have with regards to the packaging choices that we make by funding impact projects. We're also certified plastic negative. So we pay the wages of waste workers out in India to recover plastic from within 10 kilometers of the coastline. So there's things that we're doing like that in order to undo some of the decisions that we're kind of being forced to make based on what's out there already. But if what was out there was better and also affordable, which is incredibly important for our brand, our most expensive product is £24.99, and our core range ranges from like £4.50 up to that point. So when you're having to budget more than half of your allowance of money to the packaging, it just doesn't work, and all the retailers will kick you out, etc. So innovation in packaging is the most important thing for us anyway, with regards to helping us be better, I think.
Makes sense. Absolutely.
I've had a bit more time to think.
Oh, enlightened.
So I was just going to talk about formulation a bit, really, and striving to ensure that there is no compromise on performance. And that has always been kind of a key focus for what I'm doing, because it is so different. It's really important that, you know, to your point, this is beauty, this is skincare. People are doing it for, you know, to look after themselves, and it is a luxury. So it needs to be a pleasant experience, and the products really do need to work, and that's very important. But I think the more brands and customers you know, search for these things. You know, the more raw material suppliers are kind of trying to come up with new and innovative ingredients and formulations that can help us to kind of really achieve those goals. So
Really
I think
agree.
that's the other thing.
Well, I think it connects back to something John said at the beginning, like less products, but those that work well. You know, maybe you only need 3 products in your entire bathroom, but if they all work excellently, like that's better, isn't it?
Less is more.
Absolutely, less is more. Right, we're almost at final takeaways, you guys. We want to hear, you know, what are the key actions that consumers or citizens, I should say, and brands can walk away with. But before then, please have a think, audience, if you've got any questions. We've dug into quite a few topics, but if you've got any questions for any of the panelists here, we'd love to hear from them, from you guys in a minute, and also those online. I think you can submit your questions as well if you've got anything that you'd like to ask our panel. So guys, final takeaways. Let's try and practical, walking away from here, as a citizen that buys beauty and personal care products, but also if you're a brand, you know, what will be your kind of key takeaway to try and keep it to like one thing, you know, so that the to-do list is only 5 long. Like Laura, do you want to kick us off?
I think it's all about being conscious about consumption, and whether or not you're a brand or a person who's thinking about buying something, it's about knowing what your impact is and the impact of the decisions you make. So buying things carefully, and we think so hard about the way that we're actually designing the product. So we're trying to be incredibly conscious about all of our impacts. So working with brands who try and do that as a consumer can help you make it easier for you to be greener.
I love that. Yeah, that thoughtfulness is essential. Sophie?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that's so key. And I think that actually celebrating those brands and speaking about them and allowing them to grow is really important, but also calling out those who are doing the wrong thing. We know that consumers are so much more involved and so much more transparent. 52% of the UK population don't trust brands to be honest about their environmental impact. So investigate it and call them out when they don't match up to what you think they should.
Oh, love that. Yeah, be vocal, because if we don't talk about this, it's going to be a very small bubble, isn't it? Which makes sense. Anna?
I guess I'd say keep an eye out for ingredients that become massive trends, single ingredients, because what often can happen with that is that everyone jumps on board. Then there is an incredible strain on the growing of that one ingredient across the globe, which can have a really counterproductive, you know, aftermath. We've seen that happen over, again, I've only been in the industry, we've been around for 6 years, it's not long. But we are a brand who, when we see that happen, and you can tell from the way that the price increases massively. The first one it happened with for us was vanilla. We reformulated, we took it out of our products, and we were very transparent about the fact that we did that and why. Lots of brands plow on through because it's a trend, and they're going to get in more press, and they're going to get more influencers looking for the latest bakuchiol or whatever it might be. So from the consumer side, I'd say that's just one thing to slightly be aware of. And then just to close off on the certification thing, if you have a question about a brand or you wonder why they don't have something, particularly young brands, certifications are something which, again, we talked about evolving over time. You build one after another after another. Soil Association was the first one we went for because it's a great umbrella. We've recently just got cruelty-free, next will be vegan, then B Corp, etc. But it takes time and it takes a lot of money and resources. So if you've got a question about a brand, just ask them, and if they're transparent, they will tell you.
That's a great tip, because yeah, you can't expect new brands to have it all from the get-go, and you've got to invest in their journey to getting there as well. Ben?
I would say keep an open mind and have fun with it. You know, beauty products are fun to use.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, obviously, I've got skincare kind of covered off in my bathroom, but, you know, deodorants, shampoo, hair care, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's really exciting seeing all the different brands coming through, all the different things that they're doing, and thinking about, you know, what works for you, what works for your routine. And, you know, you can really enjoy that and have fun with it. So that would be one thing I would say, but also just keep an open mind as to new ways of delivering products. Laura talked about powders and all those kinds of things, you know, refilling, all those things, you know, and try them and see if they work for you. And, you know, 1 or 2 of them will work for you, and they will reduce your kind of environmental impact. So that's only a good thing.
Definitely. No, I agree. Open-mindedness is essential, you know, especially if we're trying to shrink products down to concentrates that are that big. You have to, you know, think about what things are in a totally new way. John, any final remarks?
Only because the other things I would have said have been covered. I think the other thing to bear in mind as a citizen, as a consumer, as a business, is system change.
Yeah.
I mean, the beauty industry is like one of those skyscrapers of the 20th century and the way that we used to do things. And I think the way that these people are as business founders, the way they run businesses and bring values to work has as much influence on the new generation, finding out about stuff, finding out how to care for yourself, because this has a lot to do with health rather than just appearance, and the empowering culture. So I think just seeing how little things like having 3 products in the bathroom or being one of the ambassadors here that trains people, and and lots of people now struggle with skin complaints, sensitive skin and so forth, and actually having a helpful, thinking that this industry could be a helpful part of the 21st century, as opposed to where some of the places it's been. So I think having that sort of big picture, like Anita Roddick, who was one of the first people I worked with in this industry, was just fanatically obsessed with things like against animal testing. And she was like, I'm never going to sell that much. I'm never going to be as big as L'Oreal, but I can actually change the industry just by being an example. And you can do that at any size, particularly today with today's media.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and we have to change the system. I had a great, I was at an event on Tuesday and there was a fantastic quote, which was, billion small actions that cause climate change. It'll be a billion small actions that gets us out of it. And so we can't just rely on 1 or 2 big corporations to change behavior. Like, all of us have to be vocal, make small changes, start brands that make changes, and they might be small, but the reach and culture change that can come from that is mighty. What an inspiring panel. I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions for the audience. Does anyone have anything they'd love to add? Yep, one. Oh, thank you very much.
It's like multi-benefit products.
Hi. Thank you. That was really, really interesting. And as you said, to have brands all together to share ideas has been really inspiring. And I found that the message that came through quite a lot was those 3 products, the 3 bathroom products. How, as a brand, how do you marry up because it's quite a departure from traditionally asking customers or enticing customers to buy more, which they don't necessarily need. How do you marry up bringing customers back to just buying what they absolutely need, but still have a profitable business?
Oh, tough question. Buy less, but still make money as a business. Anyone want to chip in on that?
Elsie and I were talking about this in the car on the way here. I think that you have to balance being a sustainable business and existing and therefore making greener products than your average products, but still existing to make money and sell things, with consumption and trying to sort of make consumption conscious and make sure it's considered. We've never wanted to make a neck cream, for example, because I don't believe that necks are different to the rest of your face. So why would you make a neck cream? So there's sort of some products I don't think that people necessarily need and haven't made them. But then people have always asked me for a night cream, and now actually we're going to make a night cream, even though what's different at nighttime kind of thing. So, sometimes I think you need to also give people what they want, because that's what they're going to buy anyway. And you can give them a better green version of that, which is, if they're going to buy it, then that's what they need. I think if you can make products that are more multifunctional, you need to educate about them, because that's not the way people have necessarily been educated before. So that's a journey. And it's good if you can encourage people to be conscious about what they're buying and make sure they buy one thing and they love it, maybe being able to try it, so they're not going to buy it and then chuck it away. There's loads of angles on that as well, which is sort of interesting, but it's all going to help people make better decisions, which will eventually make them happier too. So I think you can find a route through it that can create a profitable and a happy customer, profitable business and a happy customer. I think it's possible. So
awesome. Well, on that note, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up. I know there are a couple of other questions, but I think everyone's around all day, so hopefully we can keep the discussion flowing. Please join me. I mean, first of all, please take the time, some fantastic crew up here. Go on Instagram or whatever the channel you use, follow these brands, help them on their journey, cheerlead them along. We know it's tough, building a regenerative business or supporting the standards that enable it to. So please, get behind it and be vocal. And then please, join me in a massive round of applause for this fantastic crew. Thanks, everyone.
thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Wonderfully done.
Easy. You guys are awesome.
All right.